computer. Right, go.
Woo! Figured it out. Great work. You can control things. Awesome. All right, take it away.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. As Brianna mentioned, myself, Christy, and Sara will be walking through a presentation today. So we just wanted to provide you a little bit of background about us so that you know who we are, if you don't already know us. So if you can go to the next slide, Sara.
Is it showing the first slide?
Yes.
Oh, why is this not? There we go.
Oh, back. There we go. Perfect. So I'll introduce myself and then everyone else can introduce themselves. So I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate in the Faculty of Health. In terms of my publishing background, I've published 38 peer-reviewed manuscripts, and of those 19 are first authored, so I do have a little bit of experience. And I have provided peer review 29 times for various journals. And I am the co-editor-in-chief of the Healthy Populations Journal.
So I'm Christy. I'm in the second year of the PhD in Health program. I have not been publishing for very long. My first publication was just in 2007. So I've got a solid 8 under my belt now and a few still down the tunnel in various stages of review. I have one first author paper and then a bunch of other kind of co-authored mishmashes of papers. So I'm also a co-editor-in-chief at Healthy Populations Journal and helped co-found it with the assistance of Sara.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Sara Brushett. I recently just completed my master's in health promotion at Dalhousie. So I'm the operational coordinator at the Healthy Populations Institute, and with the help of Christy, co-founded the journal. And so I'm now the HPI liaison between HPI and the HPJ, so the Healthy Populations Journal. I have only been publishing for like the last 3 years. I think I have 3 published, 2 in the process right now of submitting. So when it comes to publishing, I've seen more behind the scenes work and experience than a kind of as like the first author. So thank you for coming today.
Awesome. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Just do a little bit about what a publication is and why we publish as academics. Some background on journals themselves and then the publishing process. Things to consider for authorship, and then specifically talking about how to submit to the Healthy Populations Journal. So in terms of why we publish, I'm sure as you're all in a graduate or undergraduate program, you know that peer-reviewed publications are kind of the cornerstone of what we do. It's the systematic way of sharing information with the scientific community. The definition of peer review involves the evaluation of the scientific, academic, or professional work of others within the same field. The goal of peer review is to really to ensure that the papers that are published answer meaningful questions and draw accurate conclusions based on the properly conducted experiments. So for academics, peer-reviewed publications are a form of research impact, which is often measured through various forms, such as the H-index or using alt-metric or other forms of evaluation, citations, things like that. So now that we kind of know why we publish, about the next kind of question is like, how do we publish and how do we choose about where to publish? So I pulled this from the Dalhousie library link that you see here. So I just want to talk a little bit about how to choose a journal. So one of the most important things is to make sure that the journal that you submit to would be interested in your work. It does involve, as we'll talk later, a lot of work about making sure your paper fits within the formatting and word limit. So it's really important to make sure that the journal fits within the aim of and scope of where you want to submit. So all journals have a homepage where you can find their specific aim and target population. One little tip, if you're trying to find a journal to see what their aim and scope is, to see whether it's worth submitting to, is look at the journals that you're citing in your papers and your work. If you're citing a lot of the one journal, it's a good idea to start there to see if they're interested in your work, because if you're interested in the articles that they publish, they would most likely be interested in your work. The next is to consider readership. So who's reading the papers, whether other faculty members in your department publish there, things like that. The other thing to consider is the peer-reviewed process. So how is it done? Is it double blind? They don't know who you are as submitting authors and you don't know who the reviewers are, or is it open? And how long does it take to complete the peer review process? Most journals, some journals I should say, have on their page, on their webpage, about how long the peer reviewed process takes from submission to publication. Sometimes it's an extremely long time. So if you're concerned about that, look into that process as well. Another thing to consider is the acceptance rate and the level of prestige. So what is the primary top journal in your field? Is it Nature? Is it whatever is your specific field? What's the prestige rate and acceptance rate? To decide how to best split your time, whether you want to try for that super high journal knowing that they might not accept it, or do you want to go for a medium tier journal where you're more likely to get accepted and published in a timely fashion. The next thing is similar, is the influence of the journal. So these are the impact factors of the journal themselves. So the higher the impact factor, the more influence that they have in your field. And then finally, the availability and reach. So are they indexed in PubMed, Web of Science, which allows people who are looking into this topic to find your article. So if you want more information about any of these, Dal Library has more information at the link, and you'll be able to access it as part of the presentation as well. And then just in terms of the next slide, one of the things that's important to consider is whether you want to publish in an open access journal or not. So some journals are only open access, which means that your publication is available immediately after available. So there's no paywall. So you don't have to be part of a university or pay for access. It means that it's open for all. However, in order for journals to do this, they often charge quite a high fee within the thousands of dollars. And some journals are specifically open access, so they don't include a paywalled option, whereas some are a mixed model where you can pay extra to have your article available afterwards, or you can keep it closed within the journal, which means that people have to have access through their institution. There are also repositories such as Dal Space where you can put the article on in a way that they can access your article without being the final paper. So usually there's rules to follow around this. It can't be the actual like article as it looks in the journal, but it's like the Word version of the final accepted version. And there are rules around this that you have to be aware of. Usually it's like a 12-month embargo where you can't share it. So there are options to have your work opened if you can't afford the fees. And then the next kind of thing in line with this is predatory journals. So I'm sure many of you have already experienced this. If not, as you continue in your academic journal, you likely will, is predatory journals. So these are the emails where you're being solicited to submit to a journal based on your amazing work thus far. So predatory journals are pseudo-academic journals that really only exist to collect fees from you. So they're often characterized by false and misleading information. There's quite a deviation from the best practices, so it may not be peer-reviewed. They don't check things like plagiarism. It's not very rigorous and doesn't follow traditional norms. There's a lack of transparency, and there's aggressive solicitation. So inviting you to submit to this journal, things like that. They may be hard to identify if you're not familiar with the process. So talk to your supervisor if you're not sure. Also, you can do your own research. So again, Dal Libraries has a great resource that you can look into to find out if you're not sure about a particular journal. There's ways that you can find out. There's searches that there's lists that you can do to check to see if the journal that's soliciting you is real or not. So just be aware of predatory journals. And this is a presentation topic all on its own. So if you're interested, talk to Dal Library and they can really help you understand more about this.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the process, both as an author and as a journal. So first, as an author, as we were talking about, the first thing is you want to find the journal that works best for you. So by looking at the aim and the scope of the journal, as we already said, looking at who are you citing and where are they coming from. There's also a tool that I've used before when I'm looking for various options. I think it's called Jane, Journal Author Name, and you can actually put your abstract in, and based on your abstract, it'll pull up like journals they think that might be relevant to your research for you to look at. So once you've kind of focused on a couple journals, you might want to review kind of the open access idea, like, you know, what are the fees, what can you afford? Look at their requirements for publications. Maybe the type of submission you want to do isn't available for a specific journal you're looking at. And then once you've kind of decided, you and your team, which journal you want to go for first, you're going to review your author guidelines. So you're going to want to look at, you know, like which character limits or word limits do you have? What areas do you need to write on? Do you have reference limits? Formatting type. Some people or some journals like APA, some have very specific requirements. Once you have reviewed your author's guideline, the big thing is editing. And I can't stress this enough, especially if you're working with a large team. Like if it's just you and one other person, it's kind of easier to like flip edits back and forth. But if you're working on like a large research team and you say have 5 people, every person who is an author on that publication has to have a chance to fully read and submit edits, and they have to approve the final version. And that can take a lot of time. That's something I've learned working on some very large projects at HPI. It's even slower than you could ever imagine. So account lots of time for that. So once you've all come to the final version of your submission, it then comes down to creating an account with the journal and completing all submission requirements. So every journal has different requirements, but typically there's, you have to put in if you have any conflicts of interest, and there might be other like descriptions of who completed what on the project or in the writing. A big thing here is that be mindful of how long the turnaround time is for a journal, because you can only submit to one journal at a time. So if you do go through the full process and say you get rejected, once you've received that rejection, you can then go and keep working on your manuscript and you can send it elsewhere. But during that process, you can't send your manuscript elsewhere. And so once you submit, the hardest part is just waiting patiently for notice of acceptance, revisions, or rejection. It's very, very common to get revisions. So it's very rare to get acceptance without any revisions. And then once you receive revisions, they can be minor or they could be major. So if you do get acceptance with revisions, you know, that's completely normal. Don't feel disheartened by that. I know you hear a lot of jokes about like reviewer number 2 being really harsh, but we do peer reviewed for a reason, and that's to take our writing to the next level. So the publishing process for journals. So once we receive the submission, it goes to the first layer of screening, which is does your submission align with our journal? So if it's yes, we will allow it to go to the peer reviewed process. If it's a no, it's just an automatic rejection. So let's say we have a health journal and we receive a submission on, I don't know, astrophysics, and there's no way really, it's not tied into health, then that's going to be a very obvious no. Sorry, your research isn't aligning with our journal. So then when we send it off to peer reviewed, the paper is sent to 2 or more reviewers to be read and reviewed. And as you can see here, the reviewer will check the paper. They'll put in comments and recommendations to the journal editor. So we'll receive all of those back from every person who's reviewed our article. And then from there, we will look at them just to make sure that like we agree with the reviews, that there isn't anything major missing from the reviews. And then we will allow you to know if you've been either accepted with no changes, which again is very rare, if you have minor revisions or major revisions, which we give you the chance to revise and resubmit, or if it's been rejected. And then, so at that point, the journal editors will contact the authors and let them know what the results are. And then the author, if depending on their outcome, either accepted or revised, will have the chance to make those revisions and resubmit for a final check. And then from there, we go to accept and reject. So it can take a long time depending on how quick the turnaround is with your reviewers as well, because you need to give each reviewer a week or two, sometimes more, depending on the volume of submissions, to review all their articles. Then it has to come back to us and we have to review it. So it can be a lengthy process, but we try to be as quick as possible and as fair as possible. And something to think about when you are submitting your article is your authorship considerations. So this is kind of like your order of authorship. It's very important to have this conversation early as possible. They actually recommend doing this before you start a project, if possible, but from my experience, especially with large research projects, people often leave a project maybe because they're going to another university or things have changed in their life, or we also have people join a project. So it's also really important to keep that conversation going throughout the project. So the Healthy Populations Institute actually has an authorship guideline, which is captured, one page of it is captured here. And so they follow a guideline where basically the first author and the last author are the biggest names. So your first author is typically the person who does the majority of the work, and your last author could be the supervisor or the leader of the lab or the person who is the primary funded name on the project. Different fields have different rules though. So I know some people that like being the very first author is extremely important, and when they apply for funding, that's what they look at in their department. And then I know other people who their departments only want to see the last name. So it really comes down to which field you're in, where you're going to be applying to, say, for school, or if you're going for like to be a professor or for research funding. Really look at what your field needs, and just be able to justify like why you chose your authorship in the order that you did. Everyone who is listed as an author should have contributed to this manuscript or your submission in a meaningful way. So so you shouldn't have any guest or ghost authorship. So if someone didn't do work on it, you shouldn't just be adding their name to the publication. And something that you might see is on really large projects where everyone did an equal amount of work is often they'll put authorship in alphabetical order. So I just have a couple screenshots here of the HPI guidelines. So as I was saying before, HPI puts the first or lead author will usually be the individual who has performed the majority of the work. And this is normally determined by self-identification. So often when this happens, you kind of know who the lead is on the project, who's doing most of the work. If there's a senior author that contributes to the work as well as oversees or guides a wider program of research, then they're typically listed last. So in my example, any work that I published with my supervisor, I wrote it, so my name would be first, but my supervisor, who has been there through the whole project and has either funded me or overseen the work, is always last. And so there's some other just little rules here. So in order to help prevent any potential issues regarding authorship, HPI recommends that all members of the research team discuss authorship in person, which this was written before COVID. So I know that being in person might not be possible, but just having that conversation face to face. We actually recommend tracking who has done one work and kind of setting it out. And then you can make a list of like, oh, I'm going to really hone in on the results section, and I'm like, that's my strength. And then maybe someone else takes another section, and then you flip sections. Maybe someone's really good at the data analysis part. The big thing is that everyone has an equal share and that they do the work, because sometimes we say we're going to do the work, but then it doesn't happen, or someone else takes the work. So you got to kind of have that constant check-in to make sure the work is being done by everyone. And if it isn't done by everyone, maybe the person who did less work is fine putting their name farther down the list. So if there's 5 of us, but 3 people did the majority of the work, those 3 authors would probably be the first 3, unless they're the like senior researcher who's going to be last, and then maybe the person who does the least amount of work would be like the second last author. So an acknowledgement of contributions should be provided to individuals who contributed to the work. So let's say you have a research assistant, but they aren't necessarily authors. So you can always acknowledge others. And then ghost and guest authorship is not acceptable. So benefits of publishing early and often. So it's necessary for an academic job application, and it's very important for funding opportunities. It's very good, obviously, to disseminate your research. And it's a great experience when working and writing as a team. So often if we're writing by ourselves, we get stuck in our own writing habits. But when you start working as a team, you learn other ways to write, and you learn from other people's strengths and weaknesses, and you can kind of complement each other's writing styles. So you keep growing as both as a person and as a writer. And writing is hard, and practice is important. So as I was just saying, you can learn from your teammates. And also, this creates a lot of new opportunities for yourself. For example, being invited to speak on your research or meeting someone new in that field that has similar research interests. So if you publish, other people may read your work and come to you and ask you to join their conversation or a panel discussion. They may ask you to come and work on a project with them. So now we're just going to jump into the Healthy Populations Journal specific.
Yeah. So the Healthy Populations Journal came to fruition this year, which is very exciting. It's a new opportunity for, a platform to really promote student research out of Dal, but also out of other universities as well. The important parts of our journal is that it's student-led, so the entire editorial board is all Dal students. We want to keep it open access. We want everyone to be able to share their research as widely as they can. It's peer-reviewed, so we want to publish quality research that has had some experts' eyes on it, just to be able to produce the best things that we can. So kind of the main mission of our journal is to really identify and share research that would improve population health and focus on health equity. And like I said, we're really prioritizing student research, and we really want to look at diverse and intersectional ways of knowledge expression. So what's setting our journal apart and making it a little bit different is we're really kind of soliciting artistic and creative submissions. So maybe you want to augment your research with some illustration or some other ways of showing your work. Maybe you would prefer to share your research in like a short story or through poetry. All of that's acceptable. So we want to take a little bit of a different approach, because often these type of submissions, although they're really important, and research is kind of changing to include more artistic mediums, a lot of journals don't really have these submission options. So we're trying to change that while also highlighting some of the cool student work that we know about. So yeah, like I said, our scope is pretty broad. We have a few kind of guidelines around here if you're thinking like, okay, population health and health equity, what might this include? As we're all students submitting this, we have a few guiding principles and competencies, which came out of the HPI competency framework, which was a previous research project led by the student research scholars at HPI. So you can see the publication that came out of this. I think there's a link there, that orange underline thing. If not, we can share that, but it's been floating around and it's on the HPI website as well. So yeah, any research that broadly relates to capacity enhancement, cultural safety, critical reflection, community empowerment or engagement, any research that may relate to communication of new ideas, of leadership, of being an agent of change, of knowledge and knowledge translation, broadly relating to research policy and practice, or programming and evaluation. So any of those things. We'd like to tie it in with some of the other kind of flagship projects that are going on at HPI right now. It may not fit directly into one of these, but it may be related to one of these kind of flagship projects. So anything about creating sustainable health systems, especially in a climate crisis, anything about oral health, anything about the health outcomes of people of African descent, measuring population health and health equity in health systems, and designing supportive environments for chronic disease prevention. And then also, your research may relate to one of the 12 Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. And I'm not going to read off all 17, but as you can see, these are really broad. So if you're doing health research, the odds are pretty good it fits into one of the 3 things that I just mentioned. So importantly, and this is a question that we've received a few times as the editorial board here, is how do you actually submit to this journal? So there's a link right there at the top, the ojs.library.del.ca/hpj. Once you get to that page, you just click on About, and then you click on Online Submissions. And you'll probably have to register if you haven't done so already. It's pretty easy. You're just putting in your information and email address, contact information. But one of the key points is that you do have to register as an author. You'll have a choice to register as like an author, a reviewer, or something else. Reader, maybe reader. But anyway, just make sure that you click off author. And then finally, you should be able to sign in and this page will pop up and you just click on New Submission. The only thing I think that makes this a little bit difficult to navigate is the font is really tiny and it's not really, like, the information's there, it's just not always super intuitive. But once you do submit through there, you can kind of see if your piece has been submitted or if it's in review or if you're gonna receive some feedback on it. There you go. So if you have any questions, you can send us an email. We're always posting things on Twitter. And yeah, just check out our little webpage there and consider submitting to our journal.
And now we can open up to any questions. I'm not sure if anyone typed questions into the chat. I can't open the chat because I'm sharing my screen, but I think
No
we're good
questions
just to open it
yet.
up. Okay.
But people can either type in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and ask as well.
Great presentation. That was really, really good. Good to know and good to learn more about the HPJ journal and the really nice broad scope that the journal accepts. I think that was, I had a couple questions about that and really answered it all through that. So I just see Leah's popping in the chat. I think this might be the vendors. Okay, Leah just has to go, but she said great presentation, very helpful. Thanks, Leah. Thanks for joining.
No, I don't have to go. Sorry. Someone sent me a message privately saying they had to go, but I think they meant to send it to the group. So I was just reposting it for her.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. Thank you. I got confused. I was like, wait, do you have to go? Okay, awesome. Yeah, does anybody have any questions or want to share some stories about, you know, submitting to journals, the good, the bad, the ugly, all that?
I have a quick question. Hi, it's Danielle. Thank you for a great presentation. I just have a quick question about publication process. So when the editors and reviewers comment comes back with when they say we'll consider publication with revision, is it normal that I accept all the recommended changes, or can I like not take on suggestion but back up with some argument why I'm not doing that way, but provide good rationale, or it's always safer to just accept all of their suggestions and recommendations?
I'll put my 2 cents in and then other people can add as well. I struggle with this because sometimes I disagree with their comments for a particular reason, or it's not straight up not possible. Like they want me to add like another sample or like do some other type of things that's just not possible. I think for the most part, if you can justify why you can't or don't want to do something, you can put that in. They may or may not like that depending on the reviewer, but usually if you frame it in a way that kind of tells a compelling story, it's usually okay, I would say. But like I would talk to your senior author on the paper because they may have other experiences or suggestions. but you don't necessarily have to accept everything. But one thing to consider is like, are you not accepting it because you don't want to do it, or because like you actually like can't do it, or you don't think it'll make your paper stronger? Like, I think there's different reasons why you would choose not to do something. So as long as it's for a legitimate reason and your like supervising author agrees with you, I think that's would be okay. But I'm not sure if other people have other experiences with that.
Yeah, I was going to say I've received maybe not helpful feedback. I do a lot of qualitative research, and sometimes reviewers don't understand the smaller sample size, like you're saying, and they're just like, oh, well, why would we accept this? You only talked to like 8 people or something. It's like, that's pretty good for what I did. So obviously the reviewers weren't really familiar with the methods. And, you know, if you can kind of pull more into your method section, be like, okay, like I see this reviewer said this, so I've actually substantiated the other section to really address that and make sure that the readership knows why this is substantial and enough to support what I'm saying in this paper. So sometimes there's ways around it, and the questions that the reviewers are asking, you know, you can kind of read between the lines, and sometimes there's other areas that maybe just need to be pumped up a little, or a little bit more information offered.
Yeah, I'll second what Justine and Christie both said. Definitely like take into consideration why the comment is there. And I think it's too, like, depending on how many reviewers you have, if like 2 reviewers are both saying the same thing, then it kind of puts more weight on like you wanting to really address that comment. But if maybe it's something like doesn't apply to your research or is completely like out of left field, you can justify why you wouldn't do it. Sometimes it's as simple as you might have already made like one sentence addressing their comment and they missed that one sentence, and you just need to like beef up that one sentence, or like maybe change the wording a little bit because it was unclear, and then be like, you know, it was stated, because we have very limited space to write, and we know the difference between writing a thesis where you put in every detail versus a very small manuscript where you can't put in every detail of what you did. So sometimes it's just about choosing the most relevant, most important information that you're publishing, and by tweaking one sentence can make a difference sometimes, depending on the comment. But there's definitely room on both sides, both to make edits, but also to justify your work.
Yeah.
That was a great question, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, it's Keisha. I have a question just around the HPJ submission. And I saw for one of them, I believe the word count limit is 4,000 words, which includes references. But I'm wondering if the abstract of, I think it's 250 words, is also included in that 4,000 word limit.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, so it's not?
No, you can put an abstract on top of that. That's fine.
Okay. Okay, good.
We're an easygoing journal. We're just kind of figuring it out as we go for these submissions.
Yeah, so we're going to be learning as much from all of our submissions this first year for sure. So like if anyone has specific comments on our limitations or references, or they find it, you know, really hard to keep into that limit, like do your best. But if we get a lot of submissions that are like, you know, I'm not able to do 4,000, we needed 4,500 or something, then we'll take that into consideration for future restrictions. So we're pretty lean.
Christie, Leah, I have a question, and I'm just directing it to you because I know you've done Indigenous health research. I'm just wondering if you have any like tips or pointers for folks about publishing when you're doing community-based work, especially with the OCAP principles where data is community controlled. Like, how do you navigate that as a student, knowing that we have to kind of meet those requirements in a Western setting, but also to be respectful of community?
That is such a good question, and it's really been on my mind a lot lately, just because I think that the idea of publishing in journals is very Western, right? So I don't think I'm an expert on this in any way, but I think when navigating community-based research, it's important to, you know, consider ways that you can maybe bring community members in as authors, or maybe in ways that they can contribute to that, or even to, like, before you would send in your submission to a journal, like, you know, meet up with your community and consider, like, are they happy with the way everything's portrayed, and you know, do they like what you're writing, and are they okay with that being public? And then I don't know about how you might want to navigate things like ownership, but it seems only fitting that you would want to go at the very minimum open access so that everyone could always have the ability to get that research and read it and not have it behind a paywall. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? Or are you running into that now, or what's going on?
I'm still like very early in the game, so I feel like I haven't quite come into that issue yet. It's just been on my mind, just having worked on some like scoping reviews and systematic reviews, just in terms of like making sure when I do have to navigate that, having people know it's not just this one paper, but this could be like taken up in secondary analyses and stuff like that too. And I think we often don't communicate that to our community partners, that this could be picked up in another paper, so it's not just the one thing. So that's why it's on my mind. So I just was curious what your thoughts were as well. So thank you so much. What a great presentation.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about this. Like, let's follow up on this. I think this might be something worth exploring a little bit more, especially with the secondary data analysis bit.
Definitely.
I have another question. I'm like so new to this publishing world, but so that's why I have like few questions. So I'm just wondering, like when a paper gets rejected from a journal because it doesn't fit with their scope, and I find different journal, do I disclose that this paper was, I don't know, I tried to publish in different journal, but it got rejected? Do I need to disclose that information, or just this is not, or I just need to say I'm not, I did not submit to any other places because it was already done and it was rejected, and then I move on to different journal?
That's a great question. I think what I normally do is say, like, I never disclose, like it's not, especially if it's a desk reject, it obviously just didn't fit with their scope, or they don't have space, or whatever their reasons are. As long as it's not submitted at the same time, you can click that box that says, no, it's not under consideration at another journal. The only kind of thing that I would caution against is if you received feedback on your paper and then it was rejected, instead of just turning around and submitting it to another journal, I would really consider the reviews that were provided with the reject to see if you can make the changes or some of the changes that you think would make your paper stronger before turning it around and resubmitting. Because if you say you submitted to journal 1 and it got rejected after a reviewer provided feedback, and you submitted it to journal 2 the same as like the original without making any changes, that second journal could ask the same reviewer from 1 if it's blinded, because they may be the expert on the topic. So they may invite that reviewer, and if that reviewer sees that you made no attempts at addressing their previous comments, they're not going to be very happy with you. Right. So that's kind of the only thing that I would suggest. You don't have to disclose that and when you're like doing your cover letter for the second journal, but I would just consider that before you turn around and resubmit after a rejection with reviewer feedback.
Oh, okay, that's helpful. So after maybe even if it's rejected with feedback, I will revise my paper, take that feedback, and then try another journal, but I don't need to disclose that that information. Okay, that's good to know, because I don't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to learn at the beginning. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to ask to the group, has anybody submitted to any journal, like the more kind of creative or that artistic mediums that the HPJ group were describing that they accept? Has anyone done that before? Because I think it's awesome.
I did recently to medical humanities. Got some of my paintings published along with a manuscript. So it's definitely possible.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. So how many paintings did you submit with it?
I think there was 5 illustrations that I included with it. And then, yeah, turned out pretty interesting. It seems to get a lot of attention on social media because people are not automatically like, oh, art and science.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, oh, this title looks interesting, I'll download the paper and leave it on my desktop for months.
The to read folder that's just always building and never moving anywhere. Yeah. Oh yeah. I think I don't know. You're always, especially when you're seeing it via social media or just, anything aesthetically pleasing, something that has that kind of creative component to it. It really complements the work that you do, and just being able to spend time with it is I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We've had some students ask if they can do like a collaborative piece where someone's kind of doing the more academic writing and then someone's doing like an art piece to go with it. So if anyone's thinking of submitting something like that, we're definitely open to that too. That might be a really cool kind of feature.
I'm also hoping that if we get enough submissions that we can choose one of the art pieces kind of as like the cover for this publication. Like we're hoping, and like if we can keep that going forward, like every cover would be focused on a different art piece, which I think would be really great. So, if anyone wants to submit, we encourage it.
That'd be a beautiful way, I think, to celebrate the work that's submitted to the journal and kind of prioritize those artistic mediums, like you said, just kind of having like, hey, we may showcase it on the cover. I wish I was artistic.
Me too.
Patricia asked, how many journals does DAL publish? Sara and I went to the library and talked to the librarian about this a lot. I don't have an exact number, but a lot of different faculties have their own journal. Like there's the DAL Med Journal and DAL Law Journal. I know there's quite a few over in the humanities. So there's a lot of different journals just within DAL. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, if you just go to like DAL OJS website, like just type in like Dalhousie OJS and it'll take you to like their main like platform that kind of, I don't know if this is gonna show up, but like it literally just like looks like this, and like you can see there's a lot of journals. I don't know how often they're all updated. Like I think some are like once a year. I'm not sure how long they've all been around. I know that DAL's actually working on updating their OJS platform, so we might see a change in the number, like maybe if they reduce journals that haven't published in a long time. But DAL's been publishing for a while. Any other questions?
I guess I could solicit also, if you're not really prepared to maybe submit something, but you would consider reviewing for this journal, we're also open to that too. And I think all of this potential experience here is really helpful for PAD and that CCV if you're in the running for funding applications and stuff. So, this definitely counts as experience reviewing, or it would definitely count towards a peer-reviewed publication. So come and
just building off that, I think if you're new to publishing and you're not sure if you have the ability to review, there is the option of speaking to your supervisor and doing it together with them. So you would take you would read the paper, you would take the first draft of like providing feedback, and then your supervisor would look at it and give you feedback on your feedback. It's a really great learning opportunity, and this is a very safe place to do it. So just building off what Christie said, it's a great way to build your CV and get the experience of the flip side of reviewing a paper. And then you learn a lot about submitting at the same time.
I just want to thank everyone for coming to this today. It's always nice seeing, I know we don't see everyone's faces, but it's hard to see everyone in person during COVID, obviously. So it's nice to virtually see the names and the photos and your faces on the screen. So thank you.
And I'd like to say thank you so much for the fantastic facilitation. This was, I feel everyone else likely feels the same way. Was really helpful. It was nice to get that thorough kind of insider's perspective on, being an author and then also being a reviewer, and just thinking about how we can just try and publish often, and kind of finding the right place that fits with us and our work, and transforming that into different, maybe more creative ways, which is always great to encourage. I do have to sneak off and go to another meeting, but so I just wanted to say thank you before I go, and big thanks to everybody for joining today. This was great to see the engagement and have some good conversation. Okay, I'm gonna pop off. Keep talking if you'd like. Okay.
Christie, I know you have to go as well. Just a reminder, because it's almost 2 o'clock.
Thank you for reminding me about that.
I do have another meeting at a little after 2 at 2:15, so I can say a little bit later if anyone has questions, but if not, I think we can wrap it up and enjoy the rest of our lovely day.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this.
No problem. Thanks for coming.
Great to learn about it.